The silence of the suburbs is a lie. We all agree to it, don't we? We pretend that the thin drywall and the manicured lawns create a barrier of privacy, but sound is a stubborn traveler. Most nights you hear the mundane, a muffled television, a garage door closing, or a dog barking at a passing car. But what do you do when the sound doesn't fit the neighborhood? What do you do when every single night at exactly 3:15 a.m., the air is sliced open by a sound so raw and desperate that it makes your blood turn to ice? It's not a TV. It's not a dream. It is a human scream coming from the house next door, the house where a quiet, elderly man lives alone. I've lived next to him for 3 years, and we've never traded more than a nod. But now, as I sit in the dark of my bedroom, clutching my phone with trembling hands, I realize that some secrets are too loud to stay buried. Tonight, I'm not just listening. Tonight, I'm going over there. And if you're reading this, it means I've finally decided to document what happens when you stop being a neighbor and start being a witness. Welcome back to the Curious Neighbor's Diary. This is a place where we peel back the curtain on the things people try to hide behind closed doors. Before we dive into the chilling events of this week, I want to take a moment to connect with all of you. I see people tuning in from all over the world, and it reminds me that no matter where we live, we all have that one house on the street that feels off. Before we get into the heart of this mystery, I'd love to know where you are joining me from tonight. Drop a comment below and let me know which city and country you're watching from. It's amazing to see how far these stories travel, and I make sure to read every single one of your responses. If you enjoy uncovering the truth alongside me, please make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. Your support allows me to keep digging, keep filming, and keep sharing the secrets that the rest of the world wants to ignore. Now, let's get back to that house next door, because the screaming has just started again, and this time, the lights in the basement are flickering in a pattern I've never seen before. The street I live on is the definition of average. We have oak trees that drop too many leaves in the fall and neighbors who argue about the height of their grass in the summer. Mr. Henderson lives in the house directly to my left. He's a tall, thin man who wears wool sweaters even when the humidity is pushing 90%. He spends most of his day tending to a small garden of white roses. He's the kind of person you'd call distinguished or private. For 3 years, that was the extent of my knowledge. Then came the first Tuesday of last month. I had stayed up late working on some writing, the house silent except for the hum of my refrigerator. At exactly 3:15 a.m., a sound erupted from outside that was so violent I nearly fell out of my chair. It was a high-pitched, rattling shriek. It sounded like someone was being physically torn apart. It lasted for exactly 10 seconds, followed by a heavy thud, and then nothing. Just the crickets. I went to my window and looked at Mr. Henderson's house. It was pitch black. No lights were on. No silhouettes moved behind the curtains. I told myself it was a fox. I'd read online that foxes can sound like screaming women when they're in distress. I went back to bed, but my heart didn't stop racing until the sun came up. The next night I waited. I didn't want to be right, but I stayed awake, eyes glued to the digital clock on my nightstand. 3:13, 3:14, 3:15. The scream returned. It was identical. The same pitch, the same duration, the same abrupt ending. This time, I noticed something new. A faint blue light flickered in the very corner of his basement window, which was mostly obscured by overgrown bushes. It wasn't a steady light. It pulsed. Days turned into weeks. Every night was the same ritual of terror. During the day, I would see Mr. Henderson in his garden, clipping his roses with steady, delicate hands. He looked peaceful. He looked like a man who slept like a baby. I tried to approach him once. I walked to the edge of the fence and cleared my throat. "Morning, Mr. Henderson." Quiet night, wasn't it? He stopped, his shears hovering over a bloom. He turned his head slowly, and for the first time, I saw his eyes up close. They weren't the eyes of an old man. They were sharp, cold, and incredibly alert. "The nights are always quiet for those who mind their own business," he said. His voice was like dry paper. He didn't smile. He just turned back to his roses. That was the moment I knew I couldn't let it go. The curiosity that drives this diary isn't just about gossip. It's about the feeling in your gut when you know something is wrong. I started recording the audio. I set up a high-gain microphone near my window. When I played the recordings back, I heard things the human ear misses in the moment. Underneath the scream, there was a mechanical whirring, like a motor, and a rhythmic tapping. I began to research the history of the house. It turns out Mr. Henderson wasn't the first owner. The house had been built in the 1950s by a clockmaker who vanished mysteriously. Mr. Henderson bought it in the late 90s after retiring from a career in specialized acoustics. What does that even mean? I spent hours in digital archives, looking for any link between acoustics and the strange patterns of his behavior. My obsession grew. I stopped sleeping. I started noticing things I had missed before. The delivery trucks that came to his house never stayed long. They dropped off heavy wooden crates that required 3 men to lift. Henderson would stand on his porch, watching them with that same cold gaze. One rainy Friday, I saw my chance. Henderson left. He pulled his old sedan out of the driveway and drove away. He never leaves for long, usually just a quick trip to the hardware store or the chemist. I knew I had maybe 20 minutes. I didn't think. I just moved. I crossed the lawn, my boots sinking into the mud, and made my way to that basement window. I pulled back the wet branches of the bushes. The glass was filthy, covered in decades of grime. I wiped a small circle clean and peered inside. The basement wasn't a storage room. It was a laboratory. Brass pipes ran along the ceiling and the walls were covered in acoustic foam. In the center of the room stood a tall, vertical cylinder made of glass and steel. Inside the cylinder there was something moving, a shape that looked almost human but blurred, as if it were vibrating at a frequency too fast for the eye to catch. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the rain. I reached out to touch the glass of the window, and as I did, the clock on my phone turned to 3:15 p.m. Suddenly, the cylinder inside the basement began to glow with that same pulsing blue light. The scream didn't come from a throat. It came from the machine. The vibrations were so intense that the window pane I was touching began to heat up. It wasn't a scream of pain. It was a scream of power. I heard the sound of a car engine in the driveway. Henderson was back. I scrambled away from the window, scratching my face on the thorns of the roses, and sprinted back to my house. I made it inside just as his car door slammed shut. I sat on my floor, gasping for air. My hand, the one that had touched the window, was tingling. When I looked down, the skin was glowing faintly blue. I realized then that Mr. Henderson wasn't a killer, and he wasn't a madman. He was a keeper. He was maintaining something that shouldn't exist in our world. The screams I heard every night weren't a plea for help. They were the sound of the barrier between our reality and something else being reinforced. I'm sitting here now, looking at my glowing hand. The clock says 3:10 a.m. In 5 minutes, the sound will begin again. I understand now that the curious neighbor often finds things they aren't meant to see. But once you see the truth, you can't unsee it. You become part of the diary. I'm going back over there tonight, not to spy, but to ask him for the truth. If the screaming stops tomorrow, you'll know I succeeded. If it gets louder, well, maybe you'll be the one writing the next entry in a diary of your own. Thank you for staying with me through this journey. If this story gave you chills, don't forget to subscribe to The Curious Neighbor's Diary. We explore the shadows so you don't have to. Stay curious, stay alert, and remember, keep an eye on your neighbors. You never know who is keeping the world from falling apart. See you in the next video.